She was only 7, standing outside a Bentley, whispering into her mittens, "I just want a dad for one day." The man inside didn't move at first. He had paused at the school crosswalk, waiting for a group of kids to pass. Snow tapped lightly on the windshield like hesitant fingers. He had a conference call starting in 8 minutes and a meeting with a venture capital firm right after. His schedule didn't include unexpected children or whispered wishes, but the words reached through the glass. She hadn't said it to him. She hadn't even known he was watching. She was talking to the air, to no one, to maybe everyone. Just a girl in a threadbare coat, pink boots stained with slush, mittens pulled too far over her hands as if they were shrinking into themselves. Her backpack hung off one shoulder like it was losing a fight with gravity. "I just want a dad, for one day." And that was it. No tantrum, no tears, just 7 quiet words that did something no meeting had ever done. Made the man in the Bentley forget what time it was. His name was Miles Walker, 43, CEO of ViridianCapital.net, worth just under $780 million. He had made his fortune turning small family-run businesses into high-yield profit centers. Some called him ruthless, some called him brilliant. Miles preferred the word effective. But in that moment, parked in front of Brookridge Elementary, with his leather gloves on the wheel and the heater humming, he didn't feel any of those things. He felt uncertain, uneasy. He watched her cross the sidewalk with a smaller boy, maybe a brother, who tried to shield her from the cold with his tiny body. Her hand reached out, just barely, touching his sleeve, a gesture too old for a girl, that small, like someone who had practiced comfort far too often. Miles didn't move, but something inside him did. That night, he replayed the moment in his mind, the whisper, the snow, the silence that followed. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. Like it wasn't a request, like it was a conclusion she'd come to after too many no's. Not a wish, a resignation. The next morning he drove back to that same school. He didn't know what he was doing exactly. He told himself it was curiosity. He parked in a different spot this time, off to the side, near the teacher's lot, where he wouldn't be noticed. At 8:02 a.m., he saw her again, same coat, same backpack, same boy. This time, they were walking slowly, carefully. She adjusted the boy's scarf twice before they reached the front door. He didn't complain, he just let her. There was a tired choreography to it, like a dance they did. Every morning he didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he felt like he'd met her before. Not this exact girl, but the feeling she gave him, the way the world slowed down around her, like something was off balance and she was trying to hold it together with thread and quiet. That day, Miles couldn't concentrate. His team pitched a new investment strategy. He nodded at the right times, approved the slides, gave feedback. But in between calls and line items, he found himself searching online. He looked up Brookridge Elementary school website. Student body 412. Public title I status. 63% free or reduced lunch. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He called the school. "This is Miles Walker. I was wondering if I could speak to the principal." There was a pause on the other end. "Regarding, I'd like to donate supplies to a student," quietly. Another pause. 1 moment. He was transferred to Principal Vasquez. She sounded like she'd been dealing with a dozen emergencies before 9 a.m. "Mr. Walker, you said you wanted to make a donation." "Yes, but specifically for one student." "Name?" He hesitated. "I don't know. She was outside the school yesterday, about 7. Brown hair, small frame, pink boots, worn backpack." There was a longer silence. "We have several students who could fit that description. She had a younger boy with her, maybe her brother." Another pause. "I think I know who you're talking about," the principal said carefully. "But I'd need to speak with her mother first." "I understand. Please let her know I don't want attention. No names, no photo ops. He paused. "I just want the girl to know someone heard her." Vasquez softened. "Let me make some calls. I'll get back to you." He gave his number. All day. He waited. The callback came just before 3 p.m. "I spoke with her mother. She was hesitant, but I explained that you were sincere and that you only wanted to help. She agreed to a meeting. Tomorrow, after school." Miles didn't usually attend meetings without an agenda, without numbers, without an outcome. But this time, he said yes. The next day, he wore a simple sweater, left the Bentley at home, took a rideshare instead, arrived 15 minutes early. sat in the front office like a kid waiting for detention. Principal Vasquez came out to greet him. "Thank you for coming." He stood. "Thank you for allowing this. She's in the lounge, with her mum. Follow me." He nodded, heart oddly tight in his chest. The lounge was nothing fancy: folding chairs, a vending machine, old posters of motivational quotes curling at the edges. The girl sat on one chair, backpack still on. Her legs dangled, not quite touching the floor. Beside her, a woman who looked far too young to be a mother sat with her hands clutched together, eyes wary. Her coat was thin, her face tired but proud. "Mr. Walker, this is Lena Jameson and her daughter Ava." He nodded. "Nice to meet you both." Ava said nothing, just looked at him with big, unreadable eyes. Lena's voice was quiet. "The principal said you overheard something." He nodded again, slowly. "Ava was outside my car the other day. She didn't see me. She said something. It stayed with me." Lena's expression hardened slightly. "We don't need handouts." Miles lifted his hands. "That's not what this is. I'm not here to fix anything or interfere. I just wanted to acknowledge it." What she said, it mattered. Lena looked at her daughter. Ava still hadn't spoken, so Miles crouched down, slowly, meeting her eyes. "You said you wanted a dad for one day. That's a big thing to say." Ava looked down at her boots. "I don't know what your life is like, Ava. I don't know your story. But I know what it feels like to want something and not know if it'll ever come true. And I know it's brave to say it out loud." Still no response. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small wrapped box. "I brought you something. It's not big, but it's real. You don't have to open it now." Ava took it with both hands, carefully. Lena blinked, watching her daughter's face. Ava whispered, "Finally, thank you." Miles stood. Lena still looked guarded. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't have a good answer, so he gave the true one. "Because once, a long time ago, I stood in the cold and wished for something I never thought I'd get. And I remember how quiet that wish felt." Lena stared at him for a long second, then nodded. Ava opened the box that night. Inside was a handmade leather bracelet, one word etched into it, "Seen." She didn't say anything right away, just ran her thumb across the leather as if reading the word with her skin instead of her eyes. Her mother, Lena, sat on the edge of the motel bed, watching carefully, unsure whether to say something or let the moment be. Miles had already left. He hadn't stayed to see her open the gift, hadn't asked for a thank you, hadn't even looked back. He'd just handed it over and walked out like someone passing a note through a door and choosing never to knock again. That unsettled Lena more than anything. She'd seen people give gifts with strings, men especially, people who wanted to feel good about themselves, or worse, wanted something back: admiration, praise, obedience, forgiveness. Miles hadn't asked for any of that. He hadn't even left a business card. "Do you like it?" Lena asked, her voice low, careful not to make Ava shrank into herself again. Ava nodded once, then a whisper, "It's warm." Lena tilted her head. "It's leather, sweetie. It'll warm up with your skin." "No," Ava said. "The word, it feels warm." Lena looked away quickly, because something in her chest tightened too fast to explain. She blinked it back, ran a hand through her daughter's hair, and kissed the top of her head. They didn't talk about it again that night, but Ava wore the bracelet to bed and to school the next morning. Miles, back in his glass-paneled office 40 miles away, didn't expect to hear from them again. He told himself that was the point. Quiet gesture, no applause. But the thought didn't sit as well as it should have. For the next 3 days, he found himself staring at the gift box he'd kept from the set he had bought to, unsure which style to give. The extra one sat unopened on his desk, a quiet mirror of a choice already made. On the 4th day, Principal Vasquez called. "She's been asking about you." Miles frowned. "Who?" "Ava. She wears the bracelet every day. Told her teacher it makes her feel like her arm has a secret. I thought you'd want to know." Miles didn't reply for a moment. Then, "Thank you." "Also," Vasquez added, "Lena asked me something I've never heard from a parent in this situation before." "What's that?" "She wanted to know if you'd be okay stopping by again. Not to give anything, just to say hi." Miles didn't hesitate. "I'll be there tomorrow." When he arrived the next day, Ava was waiting in the library. She had a stack of books in front of her, none of which she was reading. Her feet swung under the table like tiny pendulums. When she saw him, she smiled, but it wasn't a wide, unrestrained grin. It was a small, safe one, like a candle lit in a corner, not a firework. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he replied. Settling into the chair across from her, they sat in silence for a moment. Then Ava pulled something out from her backpack. A folded sheet of printer paper, creased and recreased so many times the folds had become lines of near transparency. She was only 7, standing outside a Bentley, whispering into her mittens, "I just want a dad for one day." The man inside didn't move at first. He had paused at the school crosswalk, waiting for a group of kids to pass. Snow tapped lightly on the windshield like hesitant fingers. He had a conference call starting in 8 minutes and a meeting with a venture capital firm right after. His schedule didn't include unexpected children or whispered wishes, but the words reached through the glass. She hadn't said it to him. She hadn't even known he was watching. She was talking to the air, to no one, to maybe everyone. Just a girl in a threadbare coat, pink boots stained with slush, mittens pulled too far over her hands as if they were shrinking into themselves. Her backpack hung off one shoulder like it was losing a fight with gravity. "I just want a dad, for one day," and that was it. No tantrum, no tears, just 7 quiet words that did something no meeting had ever done. Made the man in the Bentley forget what time it was. His name was Miles Walker, 43, CEO of ViridianCapital.net. Worth just under $780 million, he had made his fortune turning small family-run businesses into high-yield profit centers. Some called him ruthless, some called him brilliant. Miles preferred the word effective, but in that moment, parked in front of Brookridge Elementary with his leather gloves on the wheel and the heater humming, he didn't feel any of those things. He felt uncertain, uneasy. He watched across the sidewalk with a smaller boy, maybe a brother, who tried to shield her from the cold with his tiny body. Her hand reached out, just barely, touching his sleeve, a gesture too old for a girl, that small, like someone who had practiced comfort far too often. Miles didn't move, but something inside him did. That night, he replayed the moment in his mind, the whisper, the snow, the silence that followed. It wasn't just what she said, it was the way she said it. Like it wasn't a request, like it was a conclusion she'd come to after too many no's. Not a wish, a resignation. The next morning he drove back to that same school. He didn't know what he was doing exactly. He told himself it was curiosity. He parked in a different spot this time, off to the side, near the teacher's lot, where he wouldn't be noticed. At 8:02 a.m., he saw her again, same coat, same backpack, same boy. This time, they were walking slowly, carefully. She adjusted the boy's scarf twice before they reached the front door. He didn't complain. He just let her. There was a tired choreography to it, like a dance they did. Every morning he didn't know her name, didn't know her story, but he felt like he'd met her before. Not this exact girl, but the feeling she gave him, the way the world slowed down around her, like something was off balance and she was trying to hold it together with thread and quiet. That day, Miles couldn't concentrate. His team pitched a new investment strategy. He nodded at the right times, approved the slides, gave feedback, but in between calls and line items, he found himself searching online. He looked up Brookridge Elementary school website, student body, 412 public, title I status, 63% free or reduced lunch. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He called the school. "This is Miles Walker. I was wondering if I could speak to the principal." There was a pause on the other end. "Regarding, I'd like to donate supplies to a student." Quietly another pause. One moment. He was transferred to Principal Vasquez. She sounded like she'd been dealing with a dozen emergencies before 9 a.m. "Mr. Walker, you said you wanted to make a donation." "Yes, but specifically for one student." "Name?" He hesitated. "I don't know. She was outside the school yesterday, about 7. Brown hair, small frame, pink boots, worn backpack." There was a longer silence. "We have several students who could fit that description. She had a younger boy with her. Maybe her brother." Another pause. "I think I know who you're talking about," the principal said carefully. "But I'd need to speak with her mother first." "I understand. Please let her know I don't want attention. No names, no photo ops. He paused. "I just want the girl to know someone heard her." Vasquez softened. "Let me make some calls. I'll get back to you." He gave his number. All day. He waited. The callback came just before 3 p.m. "I spoke with her mother." She was hesitant, but I explained that you were sincere and that you only wanted to help. She agreed to a meeting tomorrow, after school. Miles didn't usually attend meetings without an agenda, without numbers, without an outcome, but this time, he said yes. The next day, he wore a simple sweater, left the Bentley at home, took a rideshare instead, arrived 15 minutes early, sat in the front office like a kid waiting for detention. Principal Vasquez came out to greet him. "Thank you for coming." He stood. "Thank you for allowing this. She's in the lounge, with her mum. Follow me." He nodded, heart oddly tight in his chest. The lounge was nothing fancy: folding chairs, a vending machine, old posters of motivational quotes curling at the edges. The girl sat on one chair, backpack still on. Her legs dangled, not quite touching the floor. Beside her, a woman who looked far too young to be a mother sat with her hands clutched together, eyes wary. Her coat was thin, her face tired but proud. "Mr. Walker, this is Lena Jameson and her daughter Ava." He nodded. "Nice to meet you both." Ava said nothing, just looked at him with big, unreadable eyes. Lena's voice was quiet. "The principal said you overheard something." He nodded again, slowly. "Ava was outside my car the other day. She didn't see me. She said something. It stayed with me." Lena's expression hardened slightly. "We don't need handouts." Miles lifted his hands. "That's not what this is. I'm not here to fix anything or interfere. I just wanted to acknowledge it." What she said, it mattered. Lena looked at her daughter. Ava still hadn't spoken, so Miles crouched down, slowly, meeting her eyes. "You said you wanted a dad for one day. That's a big thing to say." Ava looked down at her boots. "I don't know what your life is like, Ava. I don't know your story, but I know what it feels like to want something and not know if it'll ever come true. And I know it's brave to say it out loud." Still no response. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small wrapped box. "I brought you something. It's not big, but it's real. You don't have to open it now." Ava took it with both hands, carefully. Lena blinked, watching her daughter's face. Ava whispered, "Finally. Thank you." Miles stood. Lena still looked guarded. "Why are you doing this?" He didn't have a good answer, so he gave the true one. "Because once, a long time ago, I stood in the cold and wished for something I never thought I'd get. And I remember how quiet that wish felt." Lena stared at him for a long second, then nodded. Ava opened the box that night. Inside was a handmade leather bracelet, one word etched into it: scene. She didn't say anything right away, just ran her thumb across the leather, as if reading the word with her skin instead of her eyes. Her mother, Lena, sat on the edge of the motel bed, watching carefully, unsure whether to say something or let the moment be. Miles had already left. He hadn't stayed to see her open the gift, hadn't asked for a thank you, hadn't even looked back. He'd just handed it over and walked out like someone passing a note through a door and choosing never to knock again. That unsettled Lena more than anything. She'd seen people give gifts with strings, men, especially people who wanted to feel good about themselves, or worse, wanted something back: admiration, praise, obedience, forgiveness. Miles hadn't asked for any of that. He hadn't even left a business card. "Do you like it?" Lena asked, her voice low, careful not to make. Ava shrank into herself again. Ava nodded once, then a whisper. "It's warm." Lena tilted her head. "It's leather, sweetie. It'll warm up with your skin." "No," Ava said. "The word, it feels warm." Lena looked away quickly, because something in her chest tightened too fast to explain. She blinked it back, ran a hand through her daughter's hair, and kissed the top of her head. They didn't talk about it again that night, but Ava wore the bracelet to bed and to school the next morning. Miles, back in his glass-paneled office 40 miles away, didn't expect to hear from them again. He told himself that was the point. Quiet gesture, no applause, but the thought didn't sit as well as it should have. For the next 3 days, he found himself staring at the gift box he'd kept from the set. He had bought 2, unsure which style to give. The extra one sat unopened on his desk, a quiet mirror of a choice already made. On the 4th day, Principal Vasquez called. "She's been asking about you." Miles frowned. "Who?" "Ava. She wears the bracelet every day. Told her teacher it makes her feel like her arm has a secret. I thought you'd want to know." Miles didn't reply for a moment. Then, "Thank you." "Also," Vasquez added, "Lena asked me something I've never heard from a parent in this situation before." "What's that?" "She wanted to No, if you'd be okay stopping by again, not to give anything, just to say hi. Miles didn't hesitate. I'll be there tomorrow. When he arrived the next day, Ava was waiting in the library. She had a stack of books in front of her, none of which she was reading. Her feet swung under the table like tiny pendulums. When she saw him, she smiled, but it wasn't a wide, unrestrained grin. It was a small, safe one, like a candle lit in a corner, not a firework. Hi, she said. Hi, he replied, settling into the chair across from her. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Ava pulled something out from her backpack. A folded sheet of printer paper, creased and recreased so many times, the folds had become lines of near transparency. She handed it to him wordlessly. He unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. A man with glasses and a long coat stood next to a small girl holding a bracelet. They were in front of a car. Snowflakes dotted the scene. A speech bubble rose from the girl's mouth, containing only one word: please. Miles stared at it. It wasn't art, exactly not by adult standards, but it was perfect, honest, and it told him something no thank you note ever could. You drew this? He asked. Ava nodded. I don't think anyone's ever drawn me before. She blinked. Not even when you were a kid. Miles hesitated. I don't think I let anyone close enough to try. Ava tilted her head. That's lonely. He smiled faintly. It was why. He didn't have an easy answer, so he gave her a piece of the truth. Because when you grow up with nothing, sometimes the only way you survive is by pretending you need no one. Ava didn't answer right away. Then, very softly, I needed someone. He looked up. I didn't think anyone would come, she added. But you did. That sentence stayed in his chest for the rest of the day. Like an echo he couldn't stop replaying. He didn't go back to work after the visit. Instead, he drove past his office, kept going down the highway, found a quiet pull-off near a frozen lake, and just sat. No laptop, no phone calls, just the girl's drawing in his lap and her words ringing in his ears. I needed someone. Miles Walker had signed contracts worth millions with less emotional weight than those 3 words that night. He couldn't sleep. He found himself thinking about Ava's mom, Lena, the way she'd watched Ava, fiercely protective but exhausted. He thought about how Ava adjusted her little brother's scarf like it was second nature, about the threadbare coat, the pink boots. He thought about what it meant to need someone, and about how many people walked past those needs every day without stopping. The next morning, he did something impulsive. He drove back to Brookridge Elementary. He didn't bring a gift, didn't wear his suit, didn't prepare a speech. He just showed up. Lena was waiting on the front steps. I figured you'd come back, she said. I wasn't sure I would, he admitted. She drew you 3 more times. Miles smiled. Good ones. She drew you as Santa in one. Said your car looked like a sleigh. They both chuckled. Then Lena turned serious. Why are you doing this? He'd thought about lying, about saying something shallow or easy, but he didn't. Because I think she reminded me of someone I used to be, someone I buried a long time ago. Lena nodded slowly. That's an answer I understand. She looked toward the school. Come in, just for a few minutes. He followed her inside. The library was empty, except for Ava, sitting with her sketchpad open and a pencil in hand. When she saw him, she waved. A bigger wave this time. Like maybe she believed he'd come back. Like maybe, this time, she wasn't invisible. Miles returned the wave, awkwardly at first, then more naturally. He didn't sit across from her this time. He pulled the chair beside her, close enough to see what she was drawing. It wasn't him this time. It was a house, small, simple. 1 window, 1 door, a chimney with curls of pencil smoke. In the yard were 3 stick figures, a tall one, a medium one, and a tiny one. But your family? He asked gently. She nodded, but not fully. Almost. She pointed at the tall figure. That's a maybe person. Miles raised an eyebrow. What's a maybe person? Someone who might stay. He didn't speak for a long time. Her words cut deep in a way that wasn't harsh, but raw, like a kid pointing at a splinter in the skin and asking if it would always hurt. What makes someone go from a maybe to a yes? He asked. Ava shrugged. They come back. Simple as that. The pencil in her hand snapped slightly from pressure, but she didn't flinch. Just pulled out another and kept going. Miles sat with her while she shaded the tree next to the house, using small circles to make the leaves look fuller. It wasn't perfect, but it was thoughtful. She gave even her scribbles attention. You're good at this, he said. Ava didn't look up. Mom says drawing is how I say things I don't know how to say. Miles nodded. That makes two of us. After a few more minutes, Lena came back to the doorway. We should head out, she said gently. Your brother's waiting. Ava packed up her things. She slid the house drawing across the table, toward Miles. You can have it, she said. In case you forget. Forget what? That I'm real. He folded the paper carefully, like it was something precious. I won't, he promised. Lena offered a small, tired smile. Thank you, for whatever this is. I'm not sure either, he replied, but I think I'm supposed to keep doing it. They parted ways in the parking lot. Snow had started to fall again, slow, floating flakes that seemed too delicate to reach the ground. Miles didn't drive home. He went to the motel. He parked across the street and stared at the rundown sign that blinked the word vacancy like a tired sigh. It took him longer than he expected to work up the nerve, but finally he crossed the lot and stepped into the small, fluorescent lit lobby. The clerk barely looked up from his tablet. Checking in? No, Miles said. I wanted to ask about a family staying here, the Jamesons. The clerk squinted. You, a relative? No, a friend. Another squint, then a shrug. Room 6. They've been here about 3 months. Pay weekly. Thanks. Miles didn't knock. He didn't go near the door. He just stood at a distance, staring at the unit with the peeling white paint and rust-stained AC unit. 3 months, and Ava had still found the strength to draw, to imagine a house, to whisper her wishes into cold morning air. That night, he couldn't sleep again. He walked through his house, 6,400 square feet, 4 bedrooms he hadn't entered in weeks, art he hadn't looked at in months. There were slippers waiting by the bed, delivered daily by housekeeping, still in the plastic. His fridge was full, but he didn't eat. His closet lined with suits, none of which made him feel anything but dressed. He sat on the edge of the bed, unfolded Ava's drawing, and stared at it. She had written one word at the top of the page, barely visible in light pencil. Home. The next morning, Miles made a call. Not to a friend, not to a staffer, to a woman named Camille, the director of a local housing non-profit he had quietly supported over the years, but never spoken to in person. This is Miles Walker, he said. I need to talk about a family, urgently. Camille listened without interrupting as he explained. At the end, she said, let's get them on the list for emergency placement, but it'll still take a few weeks, maybe longer. That's too long, she hesitated. Unless someone's willing to sponsor them directly. I'll do it. Miles, it's not just paying rent, it's supporting stability, employment help, counseling, childcare. I'll fund it, fully, quietly. No announcements. Camille exhaled. All right, I'll start the paperwork. 3 days later, Lena was called to the front office during pick-up. Camille was waiting. Miles wasn't. He'd asked not to be there, not to be thanked. Camille explained everything. The housing opportunity, the support package, the no-strings sponsorship. Lena was confused, suspicious. But who? He asked to stay anonymous. I know who it was, Ava said. Her voice was calm, confident. It was Mr. Maybe. Lena blinked. Mr. What? He's a maybe person, Ava said. But I think he's getting closer to yes. The night, Lena cried for the first time in a long time. Not from fear, from relief. 2 weeks later, they moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. It wasn't fancy. The carpet was old. The oven clicked when it heated, but it had a lock that worked, and hot water that didn't sputter, and it felt like breathing again. Ava had her own bed, her own desk, her drawings went up on the wall, and, for the first time, she didn't tape them low where they might be hidden. She taped them high, like banners, like declarations, like someone had told her she was allowed to take up space. Miles didn't visit right away. He waited, let them settle. But he sent a package through Camilla's set of colored pencils, a sketchbook with thick pages, and a small note written in steady block letters. You are not a maybe. You are a yes. Mavi wrote back, not with a letter, but with a drawing. It arrived folded in an envelope with Camille's name written on it. Inside, 3 figures again. This time, the tall one had a name on his chest, yes. Miles sat at his kitchen table late that night. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the quiet drip of the faucet marking the time as he unfolded the latest drawing from Ava. This one was different. In careful, deliberate strokes, she had drawn an image of a tree with deep roots. Around the trunk, In uneven but bold letters, the words family and hope intertwined, almost as if the roots were forming those very words. It was more than just a drawing. It was a declaration and assertion that what they were building together was larger than any one person, a foundation for something lasting. He traced the lines with a gloved fingertip. He remembered a time in his own childhood when he had felt that same desperate need for connection, a time when walls built high by circumstance had kept him from feeling whole. But those memories were buried beneath years of board meetings, profit margins, and relentless ambition. Now, they resurfaced with every fragile stroke of Ava's pencil, every gentle word she had crafted in her sketches. In the days that followed, Miles found himself drawn further into their lives, although he continued to operate his business from afar, making decisions with the cold precision of a CEO. His mind was frequently interrupted by thoughts of Ava and Lena. Every morning, as he sipped his coffee in the quiet pre-dawn hours, he'd recall her soft whispers and the way she had once clutched that simple bracelet. It was as though every gesture, every interaction with them, slowly peeled away layers of isolation he had built around himself. During his daily commute, one chilly morning, he passed by neighborhoods that looked worn yet hopeful. In the window of a small grocery store, he saw a child gazing in awe at the displays of colorful produce, just as Ava might have looked at the bright world if only it had offered her a small taste of warmth. That image lingered with him, stirring something that demanded his attention. He resolved to check on Brookridge again, not simply as a benefactor now, but as someone who wanted to understand more fully the lives of those he had inadvertently come to care about. When the call came from Camille that afternoon, her voice had a touch of excitement. "We've just finalized arrangements with the local community center for the Jameson family. There's also a plan for after-school programs, hair tutoring, art classes, even a little reading nook for the kids. It's going to be small at first, but with your help, we can expand it." Camille's tone was brisk, professional, yet sprinkled with genuine warmth that always made Miles feel a little less alone. He listened as she explained how the community center would serve as a safe haven after school, a place where children could simply be children, a concept he had long forgotten in boardrooms and stock tickers. Miles cleared his throat softly and said, "I'd like to be involved, Camille, not as a distant donor, but maybe even on occasion. I want to hear their stories firsthand. I want to see the impact." There was a pause before Camille replied, "I'm really glad to hear that. We're scheduling a small event for next week at the community center. Just an informal gathering, coffee, snacks, a chance for the parents and children to share something. It won't be big, but it will be meaningful." Miles agreed. He promised himself he'd attend, even if only for a little while, to watch children play, to listen to the gentle murmur of shared hopes, to sense the tangible feeling of community that he had once known so well. His heart pounded with the anticipation of stepping into a world so different from his own, the world of everyday struggles mingling with quiet triumphs. As the week progressed, he began to receive sporadic calls. Lena, in moments of quieter vulnerability, would text him brief messages, acknowledgments of how the apartment felt less cold, or how Ava had laughed so freely the previous day while drawing. Each message made his world tilt ever so slightly, reminding him that change often began with simple, unspoken gestures. In these small exchanges, he recognized the reflection of something he once wished for himself, a presence that made the world feel a little brighter. The day of the community center event arrived. Miles arrived early, arriving at a modest building that had been transformed by volunteers into a colorful space with faded posters, repainted in vibrant hues, and mismatched chairs arranged in loose circles. He mingled quietly among the attendees, listening carefully to their stories. A woman spoke about how the center had given her a safe space to nurture her children's creativity. A young man, just out of college, recounted how the center's free tutoring had helped him navigate the challenges of early adulthood. In every conversation, Miles felt the spark of human connection rekindled in him, a stark contrast to the sterile meetings of his corporate world. Then he saw Lena and Ava across the room. Lena was talking with another parent, her eyes tired, yet filled with a gentle pride. Ava sat in a corner on a small cushion, drawing on a new sheet of paper, her focused expression conveying both concentration and hope. When their eyes met, Ava offered a shy smile, one that was cautious yet bright enough to light up the dim ambient room. After the event, As people began to leave and the volunteers started cleaning up, Miles found himself lingering outside on the steps of the community center. The wind was cool, and the fading light painted long shadows against the brick walls. He sat on a bench for a while, watching as families trickled away. In that quiet moment, he allowed himself to remember why he had come here, not because he sought accolades or attention, but because he truly cared about these people, these children who needed to be seen. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Lena. "Thank you for being here today. It meant more than I can say." Miles looked at the text and felt a tear slide down his cheek. Without thinking, he texted back a simple, heartfelt reply. "I'm honored to be part of this journey." That night, back in his own spacious yet lonely home, Miles sat at his desk, a single lamp illuminating the walls that had for so long been draped in corporate art and stark schedules. He opened his journal, something he hadn't done in years, and began to write. The words came slowly at first, tentative like the first brush of winter frost on a barren branch, but then steadily, as he recounted the events of the day, the soft smiles of the families, the cautious hope in Ava's eyes, the quiet resilience of Lena. He wrote about the importance of being seen, of being part of something that was not measured in dollars but in trust, connection, and genuine human compassion. Hours later, when the world outside was quiet and the clock showed the deep stillness of midnight, he closed his journal with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that his old self, the self defined solely by success in business and the ruthless pursuit of profit, was slowly dissolving, replaced by a new perspective, one that valued kindness above efficiency, that prized real human interaction over the cold logic of balance sheets. The next morning, Miles woke with determination. He penned an email to his board, not with the usual metrics and projections, but with a heartfelt message about how true value wasn't just measured in profits, but in the impact on real lives. It was a departure from the usual corporate communication, raw, vulnerable message about finding meaning in connection. The email was terse, honest, and different from anything they had ever seen from him. It opened a quiet controversy within the boardrooms, but Miles felt at peace. The numbers would eventually catch up, but for now, he needed to invest in something far more essential: the trust and hope of people like Lena, Ava, and the hundreds of families at Brookridge. As days turned to weeks, his visits became more frequent. He began to see that his role was not limited to providing financial assistance. He participated in after-school events, helped organize small art workshops, and even sat down for quiet conversations with the children about their dreams. In each interaction, he discovered new layers of himself. He recalled the world as it should be, a mosaic of laughter, tears, struggles, and triumphs that all interwove to make life rich and unpredictable. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Miles walked along a tree-lined street near the community center, he heard soft laughter drifting from an open window. It was a sound that resonated deep within him, a sound of hope, of life, and of a future that promised warmth, even in the toughest of winters. He paused, letting the melody wash over him, feeling as though he were on the cusp of a great transformation. He understood, finally, that by listening to a small voice on a cold day, he had rediscovered a part of himself long suppressed by ambition and isolation. That small act of being seen, of being heard, had not only changed Ava's life, had become the catalyst for a change within him. And, he thought silently as the wind played with the fallen leaves at his feet, that was something worth cherishing. Miles vowed then that he would continue to step out of his high-rise comfort, to be a part of lives that needed him, even if only in small, quiet moments. For in those moments, between the spaces of whispered wishes and the gentle touch of a caring hand, lay the true currency of humanity, a currency that no market valuation could ever capture. The day the art supplies arrived, Ava didn't speak. For almost a full minute, she just stared. A full kit, paints, colored pencils, sketchbooks with thick textured paper, brushes, markers, a small tabletop easel, each item wrapped individually and carefully labeled with her name, not printed, but handwritten. She touched each one like it might vanish if she moved too fast. When she finally did speak, her voice came out in a whisper that didn't match the way her eyes shined. "Is all this mine?" Lena, standing behind her with a half-folded grocery bag in her hand, nodded slowly. "Yes, baby, it's yours." Ava looked back down at the supplies, then quietly knelt beside them. She didn't unwrap anything right away. She just sat there, close, like someone keeping watch over a sleeping friend. The air in the small living room was quiet, except for the sound of the radiator hissing to life. Later that evening, when Ava did finally begin unwrapping, it was one item at a time. No ripping, no rushing. She peeled back each layer like it was a secret, and when she got to the note at the bottom of the box tucked beneath the final sketch pad, she read it aloud once, very softly, and then again just under her breath, like she needed to hear it twice to believe it. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to be you. She carried that note with her to school the next day, folded into her pocket, fingers resting on it like a talisman. Miles didn't know about the note's impact. He hadn't written it to change her life, only to make her feel less afraid to take up space with the things she loved. But in doing so, he had given her something far more valuable than supplies or a place to sleep. He had given her permission to try, to matter, to create. The teachers noticed the change almost immediately. Ava, once quiet and cautious, now raised her hand more often. She volunteered to help classmates, offered small compliments, and most notably she started drawing again during lunch, not hiding it, not drawing under the desk or in the corner, drawing where people could see. She started leaving sketches in odd places, on the library cart, inside returned books, folded in the lost and found. At first it confused people, then it became a sort of mystery. Who was the pencil fairy leaving tiny masterpieces all over campus? Principal Vasquez called Miles a week later. "I thought you'd like to know you seem to have started an art movement." Miles chuckled. "That wasn't my intention." "Well, intentional or not, it's working. She's opening up, and it's rippling. There are 3 other kids now bringing sketchbooks to school. 2 boys who never spoke to each other before are suddenly co-authoring a comic series. One girl asked me how you become an artist as your job." Miles paused. "All from a box of supplies. No, from someone paying attention." That evening, Miles sat in his office, no suits, no shoes, just a warm sweater and socks, and looked through the letters Camille had sent him earlier that week. There were small thank you notes from families connected to the community center. Some were single sentences, others full pages, all of them deeply personal. "My daughter says she wants to be a helper now, not just helped. I didn't think people like you existed or cared. My son sleeps through the night now. My youngest told me last night was the first time our house felt like a house, and I unsigned. When my mum got sick, I thought everything was going to fall apart. Then the backpacks showed up at school. Inside mine was a new hoodie. I haven't taken it off. It's not about the hoodie. It's about feeling like someone thought I mattered that day." He folded the letter slowly, hands trembling slightly. Miles was beginning to understand something he hadn't before. He had spent his entire career building things people used, systems, deals, structures, platforms. But this was different. This wasn't about efficiency. It was about impact, not about building something to scale, but building something to stay. The next morning, he stopped by the community center, unannounced. Camille met him at the front with her usual no-nonsense demeanor, but her eyes warmed when she saw him. "Here to inspect your investments," she teased. "No," Miles said. "Here to understand them." She nodded and gave him a brief tour. The tutoring room, the shared kitchen where weekend meals were prepared, the small reading nook they'd just furnished with beanbags and donated shelves, and finally, the art room. It wasn't much, just a repurposed office with folding tables and thrift store chairs, but the walls were already covered in drawings, not just Ava's, all kinds, rainbows, robots. A surprisingly good sketch of Principal Vasquez holding a coffee cup and looking overwhelmed. "They started doing this 2 weeks ago," Camille said, gesturing to the wall. "The kids call it the wall of possible." Miles tilted his head. "Why?" Camille smiled. "Because they said, when they draw something here, it means maybe it can happen." That stuck with him. Wall of possible. Ava's artwork was in the center drawings he recognized from the ones she used to hide. But now they were bold, confident, not perfect, but free. Camille must have noticed his expression, because she stepped closer and said, "You don't need a title to be doing good work, you know." Miles looked at her. "You don't need to be a teacher or a politician or a founder. You're showing up. That counts more than people think." "I used to think my worth came from what I built," he said, "and now I think it comes from who you build with." Camille nodded. "Then I'd say you're doing just fine." Later that evening, As the sun dipped behind the city and the air turned sharp with the first hints of winter, Miles stood alone outside the center and looked up at the stars. There weren't many visible from the street, but one or two flickered through the haze. He thought of Ava, of her whispered wish outside his car. I just want a dad for one day. He didn't know if he'd ever be that to her, not really. He didn't know if Lena would ever invite him deeper into their world, or if this would remain a quiet, precious boundary they never crossed. But he knew this. He would keep showing up, not as a savior, not as a benefactor, as someone who listens, someone who stays, someone who sees. Miles wasn't used to hesitation. In business, he made decisions before his competitors even realized a choice existed. In negotiations, he read faces faster than spreadsheets. But here, sitting in his car outside Ava and Lena's apartment, key in the ignition and fingers tapping the wheel, he hesitated. It had been 3 days since his visit to the community center. Camille had called the next day to say Ava wanted to show him a special surprise, but he hadn't replied right away. Not because he didn't want to go, but because some part of him, a quiet, guarded part he rarely acknowledged, whispered, a question he couldn't shake. What if they're beginning to need me in ways I can't promise to stay for? It wasn't a fear of giving too much money or time. It was a fear of becoming something or someone they counted on, and what that would mean if he failed. He stared at the entrance to their apartment building. One door, no buzzer, just a small faded to be on a brass plaque beneath the stairs. The sun was low, bleeding gold through the bare trees. In a few minutes, it would be dusk. He hadn't moved. He thought about turning around. Then his phone lit up. A text from Ava. I hope you're still coming. It's okay if not, but I wanted you to see what I made. That was all. No guilt. No pleading. Just that soft Ava honesty. Like a door left half open, he turned off the engine, grabbed the small bag he'd brought with some paints he'd found in a boutique art store, and walked to the door. Lena opened it before he knocked. You're late, she said, but there was no accusation in her voice. I was sitting in the car, thinking. Dangerous habit. He almost smiled. Is it still okay? I'm here. She's been watching the clock since 3. He nodded and stepped inside. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and something warm. There was soft music playing from a Bluetooth speaker on the counter, classical piano, something low and thoughtful. A candle flickered on the windowsill.avi, peeked around the corner. Her eyes lit up, but she didn't run to him. She walked, steady and certain, like someone who already trusted he wasn't going to vanish. I have something to show you, she said. Miles followed her to the small second bedroom, Ava's space, and saw it instantly. One wall, once blank and scuffed, had been transformed. She had taped drawings edge to edge across its entire length. Landscapes, characters, scenes from stories she hadn't written yet. In the center, the biggest drawing, 3 figures under a starry sky, holding hands. This is what I want, she said softly. What is it? A real story. He looked at her. What do you mean? I want to live in a story where people don't leave. Miles felt something shift inside him, like a floorboard under pressure. He didn't respond right away, just knelt down to her level, looking carefully at each drawing. She had improved. Her lines were bolder, her shading more confident. But more than that, her subjects had changed. They were no longer about longing. They were about belonging. You made all of this? He asked. Ava nodded. Every day after school. Mum let me stay up late if I was drawing. They're beautiful. Even the crooked ones. Especially the crooked ones. She smiled. I like crooked. Miles turned his attention to the starry sky piece. The figures weren't labeled, but it didn't matter. He knew who they were. You think people like me belong in stories like this? He asked her gently. She tilted her head. If you keep showing up. Lena appeared in the doorway then, drying her hands with a towel. She worked on that wall for weeks. Wouldn't let me look until it was finished. It's amazing, he said. Yeah, she is. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Lena added, you know she talks about you like you're a character. Miles blinked. What kind? A secret helper? Like in those stories where someone shows up, helps the hero, then disappears again. He looked back at Ava. I'm not very good at disappearing. Lena leaned against the doorframe. You are, actually, just not lately. There was something behind her words. Not bitterness, but wariness. He turned to face her more fully. Can I ask you something, Lena? Sure. Do you worry I'm doing too much? Her brow furrowed slightly. Too much? How? Too much for Ava. For you. Showing up, giving, being. Whatever it is I'm becoming in your lives. Lena folded the towel over itself. I think about it. Of course I do. We've been on our own for a long time. Ava's used to people stepping in for a day, then disappearing. She doesn't expect consistency. She doesn't even ask for it. I know, but here's the thing, Lena said, voice quieter now. She's not scared of it anymore. Of you leaving, why not? Because she doesn't think you're maybe anymore. He looked at her, trying to speak, but she held up a hand. I'm not saying that means you have to stay forever, or turn this into some storybook ending. I'm just saying, she believes in you now. You gave her something to hope for, and that kind of belief, it doesn't break easy. Miles felt it all at once, the weight of her trust, of Ava's faith, of this entire fragile thing they had built, without realizing how strong it had become. He sat down slowly on the edge of Ava's bed, trying to find words that didn't sound hollow. I don't know what I'm doing, Lena. You think I do? He laughed, startled. She smiled. We figure it out. Later, when Ava had gone to bed and the lights were low, Miles lingered in the kitchen with Lena. She poured tea, handed him a mug. You don't have to fix us, you know, she said. I'm not trying to. You are. A little. He nodded. Maybe, but mostly, I want to stay. Lena studied him for a long moment. Then stay, but not just for her, or for guilt, or for some wound you haven't talked about yet. He didn't answer. She didn't push, but he knew she was right. There were parts of him he hadn't shown anyone, parts even he didn't visit often. Later that night, as he walked back to his car in the cold, he looked up at the sky and saw it not a sky full of stars, but one, just one, faint and flickering, but enough. A story doesn't need to be full of constellations, it just needs one light to remind you where home is. The first email came on a Monday morning. Subject, request for interview. Local community impact story. The sender was a journalist from a regional lifestyle magazine. Harmless enough, at first glance, the kind of publication that usually ran profiles on coffee shop owners and weekend farmers markets. But the body of the message made Miles sit up straighter in his chair. We've been hearing about a quiet philanthropist who's been supporting several families through the Brookridge Community Center, particularly the Jameson family. We'd love to feature your work in our December Local Heroes edition. Would you be open to a quick interview? Happy to keep it light and positive. He stared at the screen, then closed the laptop. He didn't respond. He didn't forward the email to Camille or Lena. He didn't even save it. But it sat there, glowing in his mind like a warning. Miles had always understood one thing about the public eye. Once it finds you, it rarely looks away. And if it doesn't like what it sees, or worse, decides to turn you into a symbol, it can flatten the truth in pursuit of a headline. The next email came 2 days later. Different journalist, different tone. We've confirmed you've been anonymously funding not only housing transitions but supplies, tutoring stipends, and local programming. This isn't just generosity, it's systemic support. People should know. That word stuck. Should they? Should anyone know? Should this even be about him? That night, Miles couldn't sleep. He walked through his house barefoot, the hardwood floors cold beneath his steps. He ended up in his office again, where Ava's drawing still hung beside his desk, the one with 3 figures under a sky full of stars. She hadn't labeled them, but he no longer needed her to. He stared at it. What would happen if people started asking who he was to her, or who she was to him? What if the cameras came? What if her name ended up in an article? The next morning, he called Camille. She answered on the second ring. I know, she said, without hello. You saw the emails too. More than emails, there's been calls. One guy even showed up here pretending to be a volunteer, asking questions. Miles swore softly under his breath. Camille's voice lowered. I haven't said anything. Neither has Lena. I need to get ahead of this. She paused. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I need to protect them. Camille didn't reply right away. Finally, she said, if you go public, it puts them in the center. But if you hide, they still might end up there anyway without your voice to frame the story. I don't want Ava dragged into any of this. Then you need to decide fast, because these stories don't wait. They fill in the blanks with whatever sells. Miles closed his eyes. For the first time in weeks, the old corporate instinct kicked in, the ability to see 3 moves ahead, to anticipate public narratives like chess games. But this wasn't about strategy. It was about a child, and the quiet miracle they'd built together. He met Lena that afternoon at the park, not the usual one, but a smaller tucked-away space near the community center. Ava was still at school. The air was crisp. Leaves tumbled across the pavement in uneven swirls. They sat on a bench, a thermos of coffee between them. "I didn't want to worry you," he said, "but the press is circling." Lena nodded. "Camille told me. I haven't said anything, and I won't. Not unless you and Ava are fully okay with it." "What would it mean if you did?" "Attention, headlines, probably some photos. A narrative I can't control." Lena stared at the playground. "And if you don't, they might make it up anyway." She sipped her coffee. "Do you want the story out there?" "No. But do you want it protected?" "Yes." "Then tell it," she said quietly, "before someone else does." Miles looked at her. "Are you sure I can't protect her from everything? But I can make sure the story is hers, and yours, not someone else's headline." He didn't reply, didn't need to. That night he wrote a letter, not a press release, not a bio, a letter. It was addressed to no one in particular, and yet somehow, to everyone who might care enough to read it. "There's no title for what I've been doing. I didn't plan it. I didn't launch a non-profit or start a campaign. I just overheard a little girl say something that cracked something open in me I didn't know was still closed." She said, "I just want a dad for one day." That sentence changed me. I won't tell you her name, because it's hers, but I'll tell you she's the bravest person I know. And through her, I remembered something I hadn't in years: what it feels like to be seen, and to see others without looking away. This isn't charity. It's not saviorism. It's not about fixing anyone. It's about standing beside someone long enough for them to believe they matter. So if you must tell a story, tell hers, and tell it gently. He sent the letter to Camille. She posted it anonymously on the community center's website. No names, no photos, just words. But those words moved. The post was shared quietly at first, between volunteers, among educators, then wider. It hit a teachers' forum, then a parenting blog, then a national education group. Within 48 hours, it had over 30,000 shares. Ava never saw the post, but she felt its weight when her teacher pulled her aside after class that week and said, "Someone out there thinks you're magic." Ava blinked. "Who?" The teacher just smiled. "Doesn't matter. You already knew, didn't you?" Ava grinned a little. Ava waited until the last bit of light had faded from the sky before she asked the question. It was a Sunday evening. Dinner was finished, the dishes still drying on a towel by the sink, and the living room carried the warmth of leftover laughter from an earlier board game they hadn't quite finished. Miles had stayed later than usual. It wasn't planned, but it never was anymore. He was stretched out on the small couch, his long frame awkwardly balanced between two cushions that didn't quite agree on how to support a grown man. Ava was sitting cross-legged on the carpet beside him, sketchpad in her lap, pencil between her fingers. She was drawing a lion, not a cartoon lion, a real one, or at least as close as her pencil could get to real. Strong jaw, tilted eyes, thick mane. It looked fearless. She hadn't said much for 20 minutes, just drawn in quiet concentration while Miles absent-mindedly flipped through one of her art books, and Lena folded laundry at the kitchen table nearby. Then she set the pencil down, closed the sketchpad, and looked up at him. "Can I ask you something?" Miles lowered the book, of course. She looked serious in that way only kids can, so matter-of-fact. "It disarms you. If I called you my dad, would that be weird?" Time stopped. Lena's hand froze in the middle of folding a shirt. The quiet hum of the space between them filled with a tension none of them had prepared for. Not because the question was outrageous, but because it wasn't. Miles didn't answer right away. He sat up slowly, placing the book on the coffee table. His hands were still, his breath steady. But inside, he felt something crack, not painfully, but deeply, like ice breaking under careful feet. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She wasn't asking to be cute. She wasn't testing him. She was asking because somewhere inside her, the puzzle had formed, and the missing piece had started to resemble him. "Why would you want to?" he asked, gently. She shrugged a little, her fingers playing with the corner of her sketchpad. "You come to my stuff. You talk to me like I matter. You don't leave. That's what dads are supposed to do, right?" He nodded slowly. "Sometimes, you don't have to. I was just thinking about it. I thought maybe if I said it out loud, it might feel like a real story." He blinked. It does feel real, but weird. He looked at her. Not at the innocence, but at the clarity. The courage it took to ask that. No, he said. Not weird. Ava smiled a little. A quiet victory. From the kitchen, Lena spoke up finally, her voice calm but threaded with something more complicated. We haven't really talked about what this is, she said, stepping closer. Any of us. I know, Miles said. I'm not saying you've done anything wrong. You haven't. You've been, she hesitated, extraordinary. He met her eyes. But she's not asking for more things, Miles. She's asking if you're real. The silence sat heavy between them. Lena walked to the edge of the couch, sat on the armrest, and folded her hands. She doesn't say stuff like that often. When she was little and other kids talked about their dads, she used to pretend you had to pay to get one, like they were toys behind glass. Miles felt the air shift. That's how she kept herself from hoping. He looked down at Ava, who now seemed suddenly smaller, younger, not fragile, never that, but braver than anyone in the room. Didn't know, he said softly. You wouldn't have. She never told anyone, until now. Ava shifted on the carpet, back to sketching, but her ears were still listening. You don't have to decide anything tonight, Lena said. But she needs to know if what's happening here is something she can grow into, not just something nice that fades when it gets too hard or too visible. Miles nodded, a slow and deliberate motion. I understand. He stayed a while longer that evening, helped Ava finish her lion, watched Lena quietly straighten up the house. But when he left, there was a different kind of silence between them. Not distance, but wait. Like a door had been opened, and they all needed time to see what was on the other side. He didn't go home right away. Instead, he drove to the park, the same one where he'd first met them weeks ago. The benches were empty. The wind carried the scent of leaves and damp earth. He sat for a long time beneath a crooked tree and thought about his own father, about the silence between them, the unanswered calls, the absence that had shaped him without his permission. He remembered one afternoon when he was 10, waiting on the curb in the cold after school. His coat had a broken zipper, his fingers numb. His father had promised to pick him up. He never came. That moment had stayed with him longer than any scolding, longer than any praise. And now here he was, decades later, wondering what it meant to be picked by a child who didn't even know what a safe promise looked like, only that it might sound like his voice. When he got home, he sat at his desk and opened a blank page, not to write a speech or draft a proposal, just to write. If I say yes, I can't unsay it. If I show up tomorrow, I have to keep showing up. Not because I'm afraid of her wanting too much, but because I'm afraid I'll fail her. She doesn't know what my worst days look like. She doesn't know that sometimes I disappear in my own mind, that I freeze, that I shut doors quietly because loud ones remind me of my father. But she also doesn't know that she is the first person in years to ask me a question without wanting something in return. She just wants to believe a maybe can become a yes. The next morning, Miles made a decision. He stopped by a small shop before work. It sold handmade frames and paper goods. He picked out a wooden frame with soft edges and a natural grain. No gloss, no varnish, just raw wood, sanded smooth. He printed a single line of text on textured paper and placed it inside the frame. Then he drove to their apartment. Lena answered the door, surprised to see him so early. I don't want to stay, he said. I just wanted to drop something off. Ava appeared behind her, still in her pajamas, rubbing her eyes. Miles knelt and held out the frame. Inside, in clean black type, were the words, "You don't have to ask. I'm already here." Ava read it once, then again. Then she launched forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and held on like she was anchoring herself. Miles held her back, not like a visitor, not like a benefactor, like someone staying. The letter had gone viral, not in the explosive, overnight, trending hashtag kind of way, but in the quieter, more powerful way. It passed between educators, social workers, non-profit circles. It was posted on corkboards at libraries, shared at church groups, quoted in newsletters. No names, no photos, just a story about a child who wanted to be seen, and a man who finally stopped looking away. It changed things. Camille's inbox was full of donation inquiries. Volunteers signed up in record numbers. The community center received a grant from a local foundation, unsolicited, with a note that simply said, "Because someone reminded us what it means to matter." Lena noticed it at Ava's school. Teachers who used to nod politely now stopped her in the hallway to ask how she was doing. Parents she didn't know offered extra gloves, notebooks, snacks. One mother, a pediatrician, offered a free checkup for Ava just because. It was kind, overwhelming, a little surreal. But it wasn't just generosity, it was curiosity. People began to ask questions. Who was the man in the story? Was he just a donor, a mentor, something more? The narrative had escaped the boundaries of the letter dot, and Miles hated it, not because he feared the truth, but because the truth, once public, had a way of being twisted into something unrecognizable. It came to a head. One morning in early December, Miles was called into a quiet meeting at his office, a rare thing these days. Now that he spent more time out in the world than inside. Glass boardrooms. 3 members of his board sat around a polished table. "Don't worry," one of them said, smiling too tightly. "This isn't disciplinary. We just wanted to get ahead of things." Miles raised an eyebrow. "Get ahead of what?" The other man leaned forward. "The story, Miles, the letter, the speculation." "What speculation?" "That the child in the story is connected to you." Miles folded his hands calmly. "She is." That paused them. They hadn't expected him to say it outright. The woman on the end spoke next. "Look what you're doing. It's admirable, beautiful, but it's becoming part of your public identity. There are press requests, investors asking questions, a few competitors trying to spin it as a PR stunt." "It's not a stunt," Miles said, his voice low. "We know that," the woman said quickly. "But public perception doesn't always follow truth, and we'd recommend crafting a narrative now controlled, measured, maybe a campaign around corporate social responsibility. Use it to build goodwill, shape it." Miles looked at them, really looked, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel intimidated. He felt tired, not the kind of tired you solved with sleep, but the kind you solved with clarity. "No," they blinked. "No," one of them echoed. "I'm not shaping anything," Miles said. "This isn't a campaign, it's not a brand, it's a life, hers, mine, ours." The table was silent. He stood. "I'm not asking for your permission, but I will ask for your respect. And if I don't get that," he paused, "I'll walk." That landed harder than anything else, because if Miles Walker walked, the company would follow him, and they knew it. He left without another word. Later, that day, he met Lena at the coffee shop near Ava's school. It was the first time they'd sat together in public. She noticed the shift before he even spoke. "What happened?" "The board wanted to rebrand me," Lena snorted. "You're already branded. Quiet billionaire with a soft spot for sketching." Kiths, he cracked a smile, but it faded quickly. "It's getting louder, the noise, the attention. It's not about the letter anymore. It's about us." Lena sipped her coffee, thinking. "You want to disappear?" she asked. Double quotes. "No, I want to protect this you, Ava." She looked at him for a long moment, then said quietly, "Then maybe it's time to decide what we are." He froze slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she trailed off, then started again. "We've been orbiting each other. You visit, you care, you help, and I'm grateful, Miles, truly. But Ava's not a one-day story anymore. And neither are you." He nodded slowly. "I know. So if we're doing this, if you're part of this life, then maybe we need to stop pretending we're still in the preface." The words hung in the air. They weren't confrontational. They were honest, brave, steady. "I want to be part of this life," Miles said quietly. Lena studied him, not just hers, mine too. He looked up, met her gaze. "Yes." And with that, something shifted. Not suddenly, but profoundly. It wasn't a confession, it was a commitment. When they picked up Ava that afternoon, she ran to them, holding a folded piece of paper. "I drew something," she said, breathless. They waited until they got home. Then she unfolded the drawing. 3 figures again, but this time, they weren't just holding hands under the stars. They were walking toward something. The background was a road, trees, a tiny sign that read home. And this time, the tall figure had a name beneath him. Not maybe, not yes, just Dad. Miles looked at it for a long time. Then he hung it on the wall, right in the middle of the living room, not tucked away, not hidden where it belonged. Winter came early that year, not with storms or blizzards, but with silence, a soft stillness in the mornings, frost on the windows, breath visible in the air. It wrapped the city in a kind of hush, as though even time had slowed down to take a breath. Ava loved it. Every morning before school, she'd press her fingers to the cold glass, watching the street below. The cars, the people, the wind nudging, scarves and paper cups across the sidewalk. She called it watching the world exhale. Miles called it watching Ava become herself. He was spending most evenings at their apartment now, sometimes helping Lena with dinner, sometimes watching Ava sketch while they listened to old records, sometimes just sitting, no conversation, no performance, just presence. It was quiet, but full. One night, after Ava had gone to bed and the dishes were washed, Lena stood by the window and said, almost casually, "You know she talks about you at school, like you're already her dad." Miles nodded. "She asked me if I wanted to make it official." Lena turned to him, "And I told her I'd talk to you." Lena looked out the window again. Snow had started to fall, not enough to stick, but enough to soften everything outside. The light from the street lamps made it glow like powdered gold. "She's never had anyone stay this long," she said quietly. "I've never stayed this long either," Miles replied. She looked back at him. "Why now?" He thought for a moment, then said, "Because this isn't about me rescuing anyone. It's about finally rescuing a part of myself I didn't know was missing." Lena walked to the small drawer by the kitchen and pulled something out. A document. He didn't recognize it at first. Then he saw the words, "Legal Guardianship Application. Step 1. She handed it to him. "No pressure," she said. "Just a beginning." He looked at the paper, not like it was a form, but like it was a door. He didn't answer right away. He didn't have to. That weekend, they went back to the park, the same one where it all began. The cracked bench, the faded swing set, the cold wind. Ava insisted they sit on the same bench. All three of them. "I want to take a picture," she said. Lena pulled out her phone. "Of what?" "Of my favorite chapter," Ava replied. They posed awkwardly at first, then naturally. Then, by the second shot, they weren't posing at all. They were just there. Afterwards, Ava reached into her backpack and pulled out 3 bracelets, handmade, beaded, colorful. "I made us a set," she said. Miles held his up. The beads spelled out, "Stay." She looked at him. "That's what you did," he smiled. "That's what we all did." Later, as the sun set and they walked home, Ava ran ahead, her footsteps kicking up tiny puffs of snow dust. Lena slipped her hand into Miles's. He squeezed it gently. "You know," she said, "the first time you pulled up in your car, I thought you were just another man who was going to feel bad for us and drive away." "I almost did," he admitted. "But you didn't." "No," he said, "and I won't." They walked in silence the rest of the way, not because there was nothing left to say, but because everything had finally been said. At home, Ava taped their picture on the fridge, right above the drawing of the road to home. And in the quiet hours of that evening, while Miles read on the couch and Lena folded laundry nearby, Ava sat at her little desk and wrote a letter. "Not to send, just to keep." It said, "Dear world, my story has lots of chapters. Some are sad, some are scary, but I think I'm in the good part now, the part where people stay love, Ava." And that's how the story ends. Not with a rescue, not with a miracle. But with a quiet, ordinary miracle of something even more rare. A man who listened, a girl who asked, a mother who let hope back in, and a promise, not shouted, but whispered, "I'm already here."